Hello, my name is Melinda Layton, Spiff Practice Lead at GoCardia. Today, I would like to talk to you about life in the accelerator lane, working with accelerators and other types of lookup tables in Spiff. So we are going to start with a very simple example and work our way through some very complex examples. But first, let's just take a quick look at what an accelerator is. Many of you are probably used to it. But as an individual gets closer and goes above their individual attainments, whether on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, their commission rate goes up and up, or they may get paid bonuses or other types of special payouts, sometimes called spiffs, which is where spiff got its name from. So here we see a typical example where this person's payout goes from a 20% commission rate at the beginning of the month and goes to 25% and 30% as they get closer and closer to 100% of their monthly commission. And they would hit 35% if they go over that 100%. So let's see what that looks like in Designer. And here we can see our recruiting tiers where we're showing 25% to 50%, 50 to 75, 100 and over 100. And the individual allocations is 20, 25, 30, and 35%. But before we jump all the way into the marginals, let's start with the basics and just a simple lookup table. And to do that, we're going to look at what we call birthday bonus. On our team's birthday worksheet, we're going to go ahead and look at our account manager, who has a couple of team members. And we see that they have a birthday with their current year, a name, and a bonus amount. And they actually have to be in that month to see what that bonus amount is. So for their birthday date, we have VLOOKUP, which may be a very similar function than you are used to seeing in Excel. And we look up the user's name from a user's fact table, and we look at the column birthday, and this true is for an exact match. And the space here at the end is what to return as a default value. So very similar to what you would see in Excel. And if we go to our user's fact table, we can see that we have our lookup values, our strings, our birthday bonus, which we'll look up that amount in a minute, is just a number. And our birthdays, because we can't actually store dates in this table, are just stored as a 4-digit year, month, and day. Now, you'll notice that these are not actual employee birth dates. These are just for translating to the current year. We don't want to store personal information since this isn't considered a personal identifier information system. And I would not recommend storing this kind of information in an actual lookup table in your system. This would be better to pull in from another type of system of record, but this is just a fun way to do an example. So again, if we switch to our account manager, and you can see we're pulling their birthday date here, which is just a fairly recent year. And then we can transform that birthday date using a date function to do this year off the beginning period, a month and a day. And then check whether, look up our current birthday bonus with a similar birthday bonus column, which is also a VLOOKUP for name, user facts, and looking at that birthday bonus column. So again, Excel-like simplicity in Spiff. So VLOOKUP is the easiest type of lookup functionality. So the next type of lookup functionality is similar to a VLOOKUP, and that's going to be a tiered lookup. So a tiered lookup is something that we use when we were talking about our lead-based payouts. So a lead-based payout would be using something like our lead tables, where we have an upper bound and a lower bound, and we're looking up a single fixed number. So in this case, we are looking up on the tens. So up to 10, from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. Now, you always want the same number on both sides of a boundary, and then you just need to use true or false on the range lookup. The first value is the lookup value. The second value is the name of the table. And the third value is to tie break below. True means that the value will tie break below. So the last value, the upper value, will always stay below. So in this case, you'll see the true has 10 values in the lowest tier and then 10 values in the next tier. When it's false, that means it will tie break into the next row. And that means the first one only has 1 through 9, and then 10 through 19 are going to be the next tier. So that only really matters when you are doing those kind of that round numbers and catching that first one when you're doing tiered valued payoffs. But it's always really important to know, and it's something that's really easy to make the mistake. I actually have to go back in and check it myself sometimes. But true means that you're tie breaking below. So I did create a little example here so you can see it. And I've actually had to come back in and check this example myself. And then you can also optionally add a return value column name if you have more than one value in your table, which can be really useful if you're doing things that may pay differently for different like job titles, or if you actually need to create a 3D matrix. So for example, if on our recruiting tiers, here we have different roles, an AM manager, an individual or recruiting manager, we could actually look that up in another table. Or if we had a senior or junior lead, or if we wanted to pay not only on their percent of fees, the percent of dollar signs, but the dollar signs and the number of placements or the number of days to go live, for example, versus the dollar sign of the deal. We could do the number of days to go live as one column to tell you which column to return in a lookup table, and then return the leads as the other column. So that can be really useful to combine like your VLOOKUP and your range table. The other thing that we can see here, if we go back, is the other name for range lookup is actually tier payout, and they are exactly the same. They have the same syntax, they have the same behavior. Tier payout just looks a little bit better if you're using that for your actual payout result. If you're using that for like your leads, or you're using that for our recruiting metrics, where we use that for our annual placement rules or our team placement rules, we use our tier payout instead of our range lookup. It's exactly the same formula. It does exactly the same thing. So it's just another name. Now, the accelerators are what we came for and what we started with. So let's go back to our accelerators. So let's go to our recruiter plan, and we will look at our recruiter fees in period. Now I'm going to go to oral, and I'm going to go back to May, just because I know he has done a really good achievement here. Okay, so we can see here that the maximum rate is 30%. And I think if we go to April, yeah, the maximum rate here is still 30%. And if we sort, now you can only sort, you cannot sort on calculated fields. You must sort on connector fields. So we have our data sorted by the permanent begin work date. So I'll sort that. And you can see our month to date fees earned is going up, and our prior attainment fees are going up. Here we can see where our marginal rates come in. So we have a 20% commission rate, we have a 25% commission rate, and in between we have a 21.38% rate. So the prior attainment before this deal was 23.18%. So all the deals before that were below our 25% rate, so they were paying at 20%. After this deal, we were at the 25% rate, but for this deal, we were crossing over. So some of the deal paid at 20% and some of the deal paid at 25%. And we actually wanted to do a weighted average. And Spiff builds this in for you. And it's a function that we call mpercent, which is the marginal percent. And it allows you to put in the deal attainment table, the prior attainments, the column, and a default rate. And remember, anytime you get stuck, you can always click on the formula and it will give you an overview of how that formula works. But this is one of those that really helps to have an example and a work through example, which is why I'm doing this video. Your deal attainment is just the amount that you're working with divided by your quota. And you can have that however you do your quotas. Your table, this can either be fixed amounts, or I like to always do this as a quota allocation table. Again, makes it really flexible and easy. You can see here that none of these actually have a change from 50 to 100%. But because of the way they'd already done it for 25 to 50 and 50 to 100, I just put in that 75 to give them flexibility if they change that in the future. So makes it really easy if they decide to change this to 3, 4, 6, that they don't have to change the structure of the table. So even though they didn't do that now, it makes it a lot easier to kind of pre-structure that in just in case. The other thing to always do on your tables is the first row, always leave that lower bound blank, especially if you may have chargebacks, because sometimes your initial allocation may go below 0% if you have a chargeback, and especially if you sort by a close date, because your chargebacks will often have a close date before the beginning of the month. And you always want to leave your upper bound blank as well, because sometimes you will have overachievers beyond your wildest dreams. At least you could hope so. And either way, Spiff gets a little squirrely if something is out of bounds on the ranges. So it's always best to just leave those upper and lower bounds empty. Also, the name is going to sort in alphabetical order. So I just like to make it a very easy numeric, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have a lot of tiers, I recommend doing 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, just so that it stays in alphabetical order. Keep it really simple and clean. Okay, so prior attainment fees. The only real trick on these is when you are doing accumulated fields, it includes the deal that you are on. So to get your prior fees earned, you do need to subtract out the actual deal you're on. Now here, to make it easier to display, I actually have 2 month-to-date fields, just so that you could quickly see the percentages, but I actually did the month-to-date and prior fees earned as dollars and then divided by quota. You can do it either way. They're both valid. It just depends on which statistics you want. And sometimes, frankly, you want both just to display to your reps. Again, the math is the same, the algebra is the same. Commissions is probably one of the main places where we actually use algebra because sometimes we want to see things in different ways. But our month to date fees earned is going to use that accumulation function. You use the same exact accumulators that you use when you build your worksheet, unless you were using a longer accumulation period. If you are using a longer accumulation period, then you are going to want to use the same filter, except for the period itself will be longer. But make sure that everything that's in this period is also in the longer filter, or you will get an error that says the data does not appear in the accumulated results. This is not an error you need to worry about. This error just means one of your records is not in the other data set. If you are not filtered into your plan, it is not a problem. If you are filtered into your plan, then what you need to do is check that one filter is a subset of the other filter. So this like rec TL in period, my is recruiter team lead, hire or term in period. I need to make sure that my is recruiter team lead hire in quarter is an exact superset of the other one. Because that's usually what happens is one is not a superset of the other one. So very common mistake. Let's go back to our plan. And let's go back to our commission rate. So prior attainment fees. Like I said, the prior fee, the only difference is that you have to subtract out the current fee. And again, make sure if you're in percent and you're using mpercent, which is what we are using here, you need to be in a percent. Okay, your deal attainments, your prior attainment, these all need to be percents. And one of the nice things, and then this just needs to be the column. So input value, range table, an issue value, return column, and you can also give it a default. So if you're in a case where you would be dividing by 0, it uses that default. Because one of the other things, the other option, if you don't have a percent and you want to use either a percent or the fees themselves, is this other function called mamount. And with mamount, what we often see is people try to use it exactly like mpercent. And instead of getting the value they expect of those 20 or 25%, they get a value that looks more like this, which is a much smaller percentage, and they wonder where they went wrong. And where they went wrong is you actually need to divide this back by your first number, your deal attainment, because you're multiplying this by your allocation to get the right margin in each of the different boxes. So to get the math correct, you need to divide by the deal attainment. And then your numbers will be back to that individual commission rate. But you are now dividing by deal attainment. And deal attainment could theoretically be 0%. If your value of your deal is 0, or there's an error with your quota, so then you're setting your whole thing to 0, you're now back at a 0%. So you always want to make sure when you're dividing by a variable that you put in an edge case for that 0%. So if deal attainment equals 0, in our case, we're going to put 20% because that is what our commission is at the lowest level. You could also put in a manual error and return a specific error, or you could put in some kind of something that would catch somebody's attention. So we do have an error function, or you can put in like 0.01%, or you can put in or 0%, or you can put in a -5%. or minus 99% or something that would catch somebody's attention as an error code. But there is actually a specific error function you can use where you can say, and it would actually then crash with your specific error. But usually if this happens, we actually don't want that to error. We actually want something specific to happen. And usually this is going to happen just because we actually have a deal that had a $0 sign. Or in this case, this could happen if we ended up with 0 hours. So we wouldn't want to create that error. And you can see that that is now error resistant. And this is now correct. And if I do a max here, I should now get the same value as the max. So that's a good error check value. And that, in a nutshell, is how we do accelerators in Spiff. And I think you'll agree that even with the detours that I took to show you some of the common ways that they can go wrong, the accelerator lane in Spiff is truly a very fast on-ramp to the commission superhighway. And I hope I can show you this, that Spiff is a great tool to speed your way on any commission journey. And if you find you need help along the way, contact us at info@GoCarya or check our page at gocarya.com/spiff or reach out to me at linkedin.mlayton or mlayton@mlayton.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Please do all the YouTube things, like and subscribe, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.